I'm an architect, and very early in my career I started to be very interested in the interaction between the physical form and the life of people, because so much focus was made on the physical form, on the buildings and on the aesthetics, whatever. But good architecture is about the interaction between form and life. And while form is easy to study and easy to communicate in still photos, life is complicated. And interaction between life and form, that has not been studied much. So I've spent many years being focused on the life, seeing that cities are not good if the life in the cities are not good, and housing is not good if you can't live a good life in these places. So the people story of physical planning is what I work with. I worked 40 years in university teaching and researching in these areas, and now in recent 15 years I've been working as a consultant also to a number of cities around the world. Copenhagen was the first, Melbourne, Sydney, London, New York, and most lately Moscow, and next one will be Shanghai, where we have tried to make studies of how is the situation for especially pedestrians and public life today, how is it used today, and how can it be improved. In all the places they have this ambition that the city should be working better for pedestrians, for bicycles, and for public life, because the automobile traffic has taken over so many spaces and has eroded so many qualities in these cities that a counter-offensive is needed. So the first thing we do is to try to find out what is the current situation, and then the next question is how can that be improved.
Okay, so Prof, would you like to share with us one of your greatest takeaway from this bike shop so far?
Yeah, two things. We did this tour of this neighborhood, which is called Urban Redevelopment.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed with the number of bicycles which were actually found in the place. We saw some bicyclists, but near the stations and a number of places we saw many bicycles were parked, as a good sign that there's quite a bit of bicycling going on. I did never realize that from my visits to the center of Singapore, where I've been several times, and everybody say you cannot bicycle in Singapore and it's not possible and it's too hot and whatever. And then out here there were quite a few. That was one thing. The other thing I saw was, of course, that in my opinion the traffic engineers have had a very great influence in how the streets are organized. I think it's a perfect city for, if I was a car, I would love to live here, because the traffic engineers have done a fantastic job. But in my opinion, we shall not make the cities to make the cars happy, but we shall find a good balance so that the necessary traffic can happen without congestion and without too much pollution, but also that people can walk around as much as possible, and that they can bicycle as much as possible. And it's very obvious that, say, the United Nations World Health Organization, they have this policy about, for God's sake, make your cities all over the world so that people can walk and bicycle as much as possible in the course of their daily day, because that is a very important thing for the health of the world's population. That's why many cities now are changing, so that people are invited to walk more and to bicycle more and get out of the cars, because that's good for climate and good for health and good for livability of the cities and good for noise and pollution and a number of things. So for God's sake, go in that direction instead of putting in more and more traffic.
Okay, so one final question is, what is one suggestion that you think will improve walking and bicycling in Singapore?
Yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah, sorry, you can cut this, and you will cut it. I think one very good idea would be, as you are in a transition situation, you want to make better conditions for pedestrians and better conditions for bicyclists. And it takes a while to develop the infrastructure and whatever. But in many cities in this situation, they have started to do something on Sundays. They say on Sundays, our streets are not used so much as the other days. So on Sundays, we can close a number of streets and say on Sundays there are no traffic on this street, that street, and then you can bring out your bicycle and bring out your children, and you can walk there and you can dance there and you can bicycle up and down, teach your children to bicycle. They call it various things. They call it summer streets in New York. They call it also summer streets, I think, in London. In the most famous place where this happens is Bogota in Colombia, where they close 120-kilometer streets every Sunday, where you can bike all over the city on this one day, between 10 and 3 in the afternoon or something like that. That gives you the idea that actually it's wonderful to bicycle and you can see things, and that is to introduce the idea that there are other ways to use streets than we have become accustomed to see, full of cars and buses, whatever.